In 1961, a group of the most powerful men in America sat in a room and approved a plan that every one of them privately believed was going to fail. Not one of them said so. 100 men died on a Cuban beach because of what happened in that room. But what happened in that room was not what you think. There was no pressure. No one was threatened. No one was told to stay quiet. Nobody even gave the order to proceed. The plan moved forward entirely on its own, carried by silence, sustained by the fact that not one person in the room was willing to be the first to say what everyone in the room already knew. 25 years later, a group of engineers spent the night before a rocket launch trying to stop it. They had data, they had charts, they had a clear recommendation. The O-ring seals on the solid rocket boosters would fail in cold weather. The temperature at the launch pad would drop to 18 degrees overnight. They said all of this out loud, and then one by one, in the teleconference that followed, they went quiet. The next morning, Challenger launched. It broke apart 73 seconds later. All 7 crew members were killed. The engineer who had argued hardest against the launch watched it happen on a television screen from his office. He had known, he had said so, and then he had gone quiet. He was not afraid. He was not weak. He was not indifferent to the 7 people on that shuttle. He was a man who had correctly identified a fatal problem and then found himself in a room where saying so, one more time, felt impossible. That is not a story about cowardice, and it is not a coincidence. Because the same thing happened in that CIA briefing room in 1961 and in a corporate boardroom in Texas where an oil company burned through $40 million on a project every engineer privately knew would fail. Nobody in that room said anything either, not in the meeting. Only in the hallway afterward, to no one who could change it. Something is happening in these rooms, something that is not pressure, not fear, not ignorance, something that turns groups of intelligent, honest, experienced people into unanimous participants in decisions none of them would have made alone. It has a name, the Abilene Paradox. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Because it is not about road trips. It is not about family dinners. It is not about miserable cafeterias in West Texas. It is about every room where silence was mistaken for consent. And those rooms are everywhere. They have always been everywhere. There is a man named Jerry Harvey who spent most of his career asking one question. How do smart people end up making decisions that nobody actually wants? He had seen it in corporations, government committees, universities, organizations filled with people whose job was literally to think critically. Then, on a summer afternoon in 1974, he watched it happen inside his own family. The family was sitting on a porch in Coleman, Texas. It was brutally hot. Nobody was in any hurry to go anywhere. Harvey's father-in-law suddenly suggested a drive to Abilene for dinner, 53 miles away. Harvey didn't want to go, but he assumed everyone else probably did. So he agreed. His wife said she'd go if everyone else wanted to. Her mother said she hadn't been to Abilene in a while, and so the entire family climbed into a car with no air conditioning and drove through 104-degree Texas heat. The food was terrible. The drive was miserable. Nobody spoke much. When they finally returned home, someone admitted the truth. I really didn't want to go. Then another person said the same thing. Then another, and another. Nobody had wanted to go. Not one person. Every single person in that car privately agreed. Yet together they made a decision none of them would have made alone. That was the moment Harvey realized something important. Groups do not always fail because people disagree. Sometimes they fail because everyone secretly agrees and nobody says it. He called it the Abilene Paradox. And once you understand it, you begin to notice it everywhere. In meetings, in relationships, in businesses, in governments, in your own life. Because the most dangerous thing about the Abilene Paradox is that it looks exactly like consensus. It looks like agreement. It feels like alignment. It produces nodding heads, approved plans, signed documents, and launched rockets. But underneath all of it is a room full of people who each believe they are the only one with doubts, and every one of them is wrong. In 1951, psychologist Solomon Asch ran a simple experiment. He brought college students into a room with several other people. The catch? Everyone else in the room was secretly an actor. The participants were shown a line on a card and asked which of 3 comparison lines matched it. The answer was obvious. Yet when all the actors confidently gave the wrong answer, 75% of real participants followed them at least once, not because they couldn't see, not because they were confused, because they didn't want to stand alone. Then Asch changed one thing. He added a single person who gave the correct answer. Just one. The conformity rate collapsed. One ally was enough. One voice was enough. The group lost its power the moment someone proved they weren't alone. That is the hidden lesson behind the Abilene Paradox. People aren't always pulled toward the wrong answer. They're pushed away from isolation. The fear isn't being wrong. The fear is being the only one who thinks differently. And that fear has deep roots. For most of human history, humans lived in small tribes. Being rejected by the group wasn't uncomfortable. It was dangerous. A person cast out from the tribe lost protection, food, shelter, and safety. Your brain evolved to avoid that outcome at almost any cost. The same circuitry that reacts to physical threats reacts to social threats. When speaking up feels risky, your body interprets it as danger. Your heart rate rises, your palms sweat, your chest tightens, and something ancient inside you whispers, "Stay quiet, stay with the group, get in the car." The terrifying part is that this process is still running today. Right now, in boardrooms, in relationships, in friend groups, in companies, in classrooms, and probably in your own life. The Bay of Pigs happened because people assumed everyone else supported the plan. The Challenger disaster happened because people stopped challenging the decision when the room shifted. An oil company lost $40 million because every engineer thought someone else must know better. Nobody had confidence. Everybody assumed somebody else did. And that assumption became reality. The Abilene Paradox isn't really about courage. That's the surprising part. The engineers who objected to Challenger had already spoken up. The advisors who doubted the Bay of Pigs had written private concerns. The courage existed. What didn't exist was a room where speaking felt possible. Jerry Harvey eventually concluded that solving the problem wasn't about finding braver people. Even brave people go to Abilene. The solution was much smaller. One question, one crack in the silence, one person willing to ask, "Is everyone actually comfortable with this?" That's it. Not a speech, not a confrontation, just a question. A genuine invitation for honesty. Because the moment one person speaks, someone else usually follows. Then another, then another. And suddenly, the illusion disappears. The room realizes it never wanted to go to Abilene in the first place. Think about your own life. The relationship you stayed in longer than you wanted. The job you kept because it seemed like what everyone expected. The opinion you didn't share. The feedback you never gave. The project you continued supporting even though you knew something felt wrong. How many of those decisions were actually yours? How many were built from assumptions? How many were maintained by silence? Most people believe they would have spoken up in the CIA briefing room. Most people believe they would have challenged the Challenger launch. Most people believe they would have been different. But the Abilene Paradox survives because almost everyone believes that. Knowledge alone doesn't protect you. Knowing the name of the trap doesn't make you immune to it. It simply gives you a chance to recognize it before the car gets too far down the road. Jerry Harvey spent the rest of his life studying this problem. And after decades of research, he kept returning to the same answer. One honest voice, one genuine question, One person willing to test whether the consensus is actually real. Because the consensus often isn't real. It's a hallucination built from silence, a shared misunderstanding, a story nobody intended to write. The people around you probably aren't as certain as they appear. The person in the front seat may not want to go either. The person next to you may be waiting for someone else to speak first. The trip survives because everyone assumes everyone else wants it. The moment someone says otherwise, the spell breaks. The Abilene Paradox has no power in a room where one person is honest. None at all. Nobody is going to Abilene if someone says they don't want to go. The first someone has to be someone. It might as well be you.